Hello and welcome back to the shed. In today's episode, I'm going to start a new build series for this ground cabinet that you see here on the ground behind me. It's going to be over a number of videos and it's going to be quite detailed in every process of how I built it. In this first video, we're going to be covering marking out the dovetails, marking the waste, cutting out the waste for the pins, and then using a chisel to tidy it all up. Hope you enjoy it. For this project, the overall width is 235mm. The length of these pieces is 785mm, and they're 19mm thick. So these are going to be housed into the side of the large top and bottom pieces, which are about 45mm thick. I'm only going to put these blind dovetails in 19mm into the top. So I took that away to get the 830 height that's behind me here that I require. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark each one of these ends, 1 through 4, and that way I will be able to match it back to the top so I know that I'm actually doing it in the correct position and not out of place. So first step is to get our dividers and we'll mark all the dovetails out on every single piece. First step is I'm going to score a line on these pieces, mark it off here, so I've got the exact thickness of the board here now, and I'm going to scribe a line right around the end of every single piece. So I'm only going to scribe it on this side, which will be the inside and the two ends, because I don't want the exposed scribe line on the outside. So what I'll do after I've finished marking these is I will keep this setting on here, and I will use that to mark the top pieces when we go to actually do the blind dovetails. So now that's done, I'm going to clamp one of these in the vise here and I'll show you the divider method. So I have this sitting in the vise here and I have two dividers here. This pair is set for the half pins that are going to be on the side, and this divider is set for marking out the actual dovetails, and the width of this is the width of the dovetail plus the pin. So what I've done here is with the half pins, this is at half the thickness of the board, so these are set to 9.5mm, and we'll come in and mark that from the edge. Mark that from the edge, and I will get a pencil to start with, mark that in. From there, we will take a divider for the dovetails and we will step it out. So we start here, mark it out, and we don't mark this last one because it doesn't reach. Come back to this half pin line and we walk it back the other way. And what that's done is given us our mark for our dovetails and for the pins. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the top first. here I have my 1 1/8 little dovetail square. Really, the 1 1/8, 1 6, it doesn't really matter. It's mainly just personal preference. So I'm going to use this because I've got it. But really, any angle, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to mark this on this outside so you guys can see it. But normally I would only mark on my side, because that's all I need. So I'm going to just mark my waist here. So now I'm just going to take you through what I actually did here. So you can see these lines here, marked by the half pin. And as we step these out, you can see it's come to here, marked like that. And then when we get to this end and we come back the other way, it marks the other side of the dovetail and the pin. And we can use that on every single side, and because we've got the dividers, it's quick and easy to do, and then we just lay it straight out. So now that we've got the dovetails marked on all of these, we're going to cut out our dovetails. Now, remember how we marked the waist? We marked the waist for the pins. The idea is that we're going to cut either on the waist side of the line or directly on the line. At this stage, it doesn't really matter where you cut, but after you've done all the marking out and you want to keep them even, it's good to stay right on the line if you can, and not have to do any chisel work of any note if you can avoid it. So I'm going to be using my dovetail saw here, a little bit of candle wax on it to help it slide through, and we'll just start the process like so. Run through on the top nice and square. Keep it to the angle and chop through. So now that I've cut those dovetails, what I'm going to do on the back here is, with my marking knife, I'm just going to put a line between the tails here. So I don't have a marking knife line right the way, or a mark all the way through. Then I'm going to grab my square and my knife and just make sure these are nice and refined. So just put my saw back in these and just take them down just above the line. So now that that's done, what we're going to do is cut out these half pins, and then we'll grab a chisel and start chiseling out these pins. So what I'm going to do here is take a chisel and just mark it up against that mark that we put in here with the marking gauge. And if you've got any flappy bits. And it's given me a little knife wall to bring the saw rested up against it, and it'll be right on top of that line when it's cut. And we'll just quickly clean up that corner where the saw didn't get right in there. Okay, so there are a couple of different ways we can cut these pins out. You can use a coping saw, take the waste out, and then chisel the rest of it out back to the baseline. We can get it held in the vise here, and we can come in and just chisel against it until we've worked through on both sides. Just tapping onto the knife ball with the chisel and then paring back to it. So what I've done here is I've just whacked a clamp in over here just to hold it to my bench top. It's just overhanging a touch. Make sure it's all on top of the bench, so when you chisel, you're actually chiseling down on your bench, not into open air, which could split your timber. Make sure you got a nice sharp chisel to start with. You want it to easily fit in between your two lines so it doesn't overcut it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my chisel down into this knife wall, lean it forward slightly, and just give it a very gentle tap. At this stage, you're going to do that to every one of them, and you don't want it to hit it hard because you will undercut your baseline. And then, this chisel's too big for paring, so I'm just going to go to one smaller. And we just simply pare back against it. So we're just being very careful. Just pushing gently up against that wall. And so we're just coming in halfway from one side. So again, slight tip. And as we remove the waste, we can get a little bit firmer and firmer on this. And hit down a little bit further. Without risking undercutting the baseline. And as I said, see, now I'm coming further back to remove more waste. Don't need to come back more than about where I am here, which is 2/3 of the way back. I find this is a great way. It's a very accurate way of doing it. You can, of course, use a coping saw, cut the waste out. It is much faster, but I find it's less accurate. And there's a lot more complicated chisel work to actually get this to remove. Once this is done, there's no real cleanup because you've cut nice and sharp and paired with the chisel to do the work. And then you'll see here we continue the same process on this side. Come in, line the chisel up on the baseline, tip it forward slightly, give a light little tap. Now the slight little tap here is just to initiate it, make sure the fibers are cut, and it prevents us from undercutting the baseline with just a little tap until we've pared the first bit of material out. And paring this first little bit of material out creates a little bit of a relief, which allows us to push the chisel down further without undercutting the baseline and having the bevel of the chisel force the chisel past the baseline. Now this is important with all types of wood, but particularly softwoods like pine. So right here, as we're hitting them, they're breaking off now. So now I'll unattach them and make sure they don't get under your project. You don't want to dent your timber. And if there are any little raggedy bits, this is where we'll clean them up. What I'm going to do now, put this back up in the vise and make sure I pare from the outside edge through, just to make sure that any blowout that might occur, which shouldn't, is on the outside. And so we're simply just paring this bottom surface to remove anything that might have been left behind. But as you can see, doing it this way, there is very little left to pare away. It's just a little light paring. Now, if you find out that you're a little bit off your lines here, that doesn't really matter, because we're transferring these exactly on to put our tails in, so wherever they are left, it doesn't really matter unless you're pedantic and you want all the tails to be absolutely matching, which normally doesn't happen with hand tool work. But if it bothers you and you've made a mistake, you can go ahead and try again, since it's just inexpensive pine, or you can just run with it and not worry about it and improve the next time you do them. Now, just on the edges here, I said that I needed to tidy that up. I went a little bit off my baseline there with the saw, so I'm just going to tidy that up. So just here, it's on my line on the front, not quite on my line at the back. And it's a little bit furry. Just a simple process of paring it with a nice sharp chisel. And your chisels have to be nice and sharp for this. You don't want them to tear the fibers, you want them to chop the fibers, and because it's end grain, you want to make sure that they're nice and crisp. I don't know if you can see it, but I did just undercut the baseline here in a couple of spots by accident. Now, this is the inside face, so it's not going to be seen, so it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that your outside face is nice and clean. Even if you did undercut there a little bit, most people are not going to notice it unless you look really close. And if you're doing this as a shop project, as a practice, it really doesn't matter. We now need to transfer these tails to the top and bottom so we can cut out the tail material for the pins. Just make sure there's no material in the way when you go to knock it together. Thank you for watching. If you like what you've seen here today and would like to support me so I can continue to make these great videos for you, please consider liking and subscribing below and checking out any of the links that I've left down in the description. I'd also urge you to check out my newly created Facebook page and Instagram, where I'm linking these videos and also some behind the scenes photos and videos. Thank you.